I mean, I think dinner's ready, but let's like hurry up and do one more before I get yelled at. So perpendicular. So we've been talking a lot about parallel lines. Let's talk about perpendicular lines. Hopefully, you know perpendicular lines. Um, perpendicular lines form 90-degree angles. Okay, obviously. Where's my pen and stuff? Jeez, oh please. Okay, perpendicular lines form 90-degree angles. Okay, that's something you already know. So there's such a thing called a perpendicular bisector. All right, and that's a little bit different. Okay, you already know what bisect means. It means they cut something directly in half. And perpendicular, so that means you're talking about a line that's perpendicular to a segment at its midpoint, or a line segment that's perpendicular um, uh, to another line segment at its midpoint. All right. Now, this here, I drew an example of a line that's perpendicular. This actually looks more like a ray. All right. And we know it's perpendicular because we put this little box in here. That tells us guaranteed this is perpendicular. All right. But we can't say this is the midpoint yet because you see these arrows here? That means these go on and on and forever in both directions. Okay. And so for those of you that like to listen, hear what I'm telling you. You can't have a midpoint of a line. All right. There, here, let me just draw it real quick. You see this line? This thing has no midpoint. All right. Because what's the middle of forever? Right? That's the issue. What's the middle of forever? There is no middle of forever. Okay. So even a ray, right? Like, okay, what's the midpoint of this ray? A ray also doesn't have a midpoint. There's no midpoint. Why not? Because once again, what's the middle of forever, dude? It may have a starting point, but it goes on and on and on and on and on forever. So what's the middle of forever? There isn't one. Okay. But if we're talking about a line segment, all right, this does have a midpoint. It sure does. Because you're not asking the question, what's the middle of forever? You're just saying, what's the middle? And, you know, something that's finite like that definitely has one. You'd say, about right there. So in this case, if we wanted to show this as a perpendicular bisector, we would have to say, okay, well, here's this point here. We'll call this A. And here's this can be B. And then we'll say another point here. We'll call it C. But then I'm going to put these tick marks in here that says that there and that there. Ah, all right, and now those marks show that segment AB is equivalent to segment BC, and so that means B is a midpoint, and so then that means that and I need to put on something on here that ray BD is a perpendicular bisector. Okay, so so that's our logical reasoning that helps us with that. So moving on to the next step, you know, why not? Let's write a little proof right here. So we know that AB. Oh, didn't close this. Okay, I write too small sometimes. All right, try this again. All right, so we know that line segment AB is congruent to line segment BC. How do we know that? That's given. And what can we say based off of that piece of information? We can say that B is the midpoint. All right, B is the midpoint of AC. And you're going to be like, well, how do you know that? That's the definition of a midpoint. Okay, by definition. All right. And so then what else do we know then? Then we know that angle DBC is 90 degrees. How do we know that? It's given. See, that's given. Okay. And then that must mean that ray BD is wait, ray BD is perpendicular to, actually, let me write this correctly. Ray BD is perpendicular to line AC. How do we know that? You know, that's the definition of a perpendicular line. Okay. And then finally, we can say that ray BD is a perpendicular bisector line AC. I'm not sorry, line segment AC. All right, and how do we know that? That's the definition of perpendicular bisector. And that's done right there. Getting used to doing proofs a little bit is what we need to be doing. So let me pause that real quick. So this is really just me introducing the idea of perpendicular lines and perpendicular bisectors. And what we're going to do next is we're going to take the same situations we had before. So we had a line here, and then we had another line here. I'm doing my best to make them kind of look parallel. But this time the transversal is going to cut this way. And instead of me telling you that these lines are necessarily parallel, what if I just told you that they were 90 degrees? What if I told you that this angle here was 90 degrees and so was this one? Okay, this is where our next video is gonna start, which is going to be understanding perpendicular lines and perpendicular transversals as well. All right, see you guys on in the next video.